So for me, it's been a bit of a journey with self-acceptance. I think being told at such a young age that your body is broken, it's not working, really messes with your head in terms of being able to love and accept your body as it is. And that led to a lot of issues with food and exercise. And I had a pretty tumultuous journey with that all. So yoga really has given me self-acceptance and self-love and helps me to see my body as this beautiful vessel and a gift.
Hi, everyone. This is Diane Gilman, formerly known as the Queen of Jeans, but now the proud host of my podcast, Too Young to Be Old. I have a question to ask you. What if you just got your period at 13 and 2 years later you went into full menopause? Oh my God. What would you do? What would it feel like? Mentally, where would your head be? You know, we have enough problems, honestly, going through menopause starting at about 42, 45. So today we have an incredible guest, and she's joining us from Nepal and the Himalayas, where she practices yoga, and which has helped her a lot. And her name is Isabelle Geraghty. Isabelle, thank you so much for joining us. And your story to me is so relevant, as I will bet it is to many women, because for us here in America, we are going through a really draconian kind of handmaids phase. We just had a state, Arizona, which enacted 160-year-old law stating that if you needed to have an induced miscarriage, if anything was wrong with your pregnancy and you wanted to try and fix it, you're going to be held as a criminal and punished as a criminal. So I can tell you that when I went into menopause, and I thought my menopause was early at like 42 years old, I was embarrassed. I felt isolated. I didn't understand a lot of it. It wasn't classical. So I was panic stricken. I was having nightmares. I mean, it was bizarre. And women don't talk to women about this. So tell us what happened. You are a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you're just buzzing along. And then
Yeah, so I got my first period a little late, or a little later than my friends. I guess I was 13 or 14, and then I got a regular period for about 6 months, and then it became really irregular, and I started to get concerned about it, so much so that I went to my mom and I asked her, could she bring me to the doctor? So I guess something in me must have just known. And,
yeah.
because I think this is the kind of thing, especially young girls, they just pass it off and they'll be like, oh, it will regulate when you're older. But luckily she took me seriously and I was able to get a diagnosis after probably 6 months to a year of tests, which was premature ovarian. At the time, it was called premature ovarian failure. Now we call it premature ovarian insufficiency. Yeah, it's essentially, it can happen to anyone before the age of 40. So the official term is before the age of 40. If you go into menopause, it's premature ovarian insufficiency.
And let me ask you something that is meaningful to me and possibly the audience. Did you choose to go to a female gynecologist, or were you with a male gynecologist? Just asking.
Well, I guess I was 14 or 15, so I don't think I had a choice in it, but I was very lucky to have a female gynecologist, and she was I suppose, specialized in pediatric gynecology because I was still a child.
Wow.
So, yeah. So she was doing great work.
Okay, so it took you a year to get a fairly clear, concise diagnosis. And in the meantime, you said to me brain fog. panic attacks. And
Hmm.
were you given drugs to mask those, or was that just something you had to live with?
That was something I just lived with. I guess I thought it was a normal part of being a teenager, to be honest.
Woo!
Because I think people always tell you you're going through puberty and your hormones go crazy, but I was really going through the menopause, so it was probably more extreme for me, but I didn't realize. I just downplayed it. So yeah, I had quite a few mental health issues, just anxiety, depression, panic attacks,
Just
just
like women,
unexplained, out of nowhere,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, just like women have. And I remember I was I was young. 42 was considered young,
Hmm.
and I was there was no one to talk to. Everybody my age hadn't gone through it yet, and no one ever. I mean, if you said the word menopause, you whispered it. If you
Hmm.
said the word menopause, you got a judgmental look like, I can't believe you're talking about that. So the entire deal was to suffer in silence. And
Hmm.
did they ever use the word menopause with you, or was it something else? Because it was that, really.
Yeah, it was that. The term that was used for me was premature ovarian insufficiency, or premature ovarian failure. And for me, I honestly didn't. I I think I was so scared of this word menopause, and because I was so young, because I was in my teens, in my 20s, I really pushed that word away. It
Oh,
felt
yeah.
really, it felt, because of course there's this ripple effect, right, of everyone not talking about it, everyone thinking it's so ashamed when they're in their 50s. So of course that trickles down and made me feel even more ashamed by this idea of being so young and having this happen
Yes.
and
You know
having
what?
no one to speak to.
Losing your fertility, whether you're doing it at 15 or it's happening to you at 40. And my symptoms really started at 40, and it turned out that a big part of that was leading a very high stress lifestyle for me. It was just always building my career, always not enough sleep, not good food, being in an airplane, being under pressure to perform. And so when it started to happen, probably like it happened for you, it was subtle. And suddenly you didn't sleep well at night. And then
Mhm.
suddenly you recognized you were getting nightmares that woke you up. And then did you see your hair or your skin or your muscle response or anything start to become different, or no?
So for me, very quickly after my diagnosis, I was put on the contraceptive pill, which masked all my symptoms. So
Whoa.
I'm actually getting a lot of symptoms now that I've moved on to a more body identical hormone regime. So yeah, this year I started losing a bit of hair and I got acne for the first time in my life. So I'm having to deal with all those things now, but hopefully it will settle soon.
But you are on bioidentical hormones, and then you got something that honestly is more modern than what I got. You
Hmm.
got a marina coil, which is an internal way to keep giving you progesterone. You should, by all medical knowledge, start to regain your hair, start to get kind of
Yeah.
evened out there.
So my estrogen that I take transdermally is body identical, but my progesterone is not body identical. So I think that could be a part of the issue. For me, I have to take, the only one that you can take is orally, and it's really expensive and it's kind of hard to get. So I'm traveling for this year, so financially and just for convenience, it made sense for me to get the IUD. But my plan would be to go back on the
Okay,
more
so now I'm going
natural
to bring
than.
up something that is completely an unpopular subject to bring up, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, I took bioidentical hormones for years. I was on
Mm-hmm.
television. It highly benefited me in terms of my energy level, my hair, my skin, the quality of my musculature, everything. And then I got breast cancer at 72. So I took bioidentical hormones for 30 years. And the first thing my surgeon, who was really knowledgeable and her whole career was breast cancer, said was, "Oh, you flooded your system with female hormones for years. That is a big part of why you got breast cancer."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you, as a 25-year-old now, has anybody talked to you about this? Has anybody given you a plan for sustainability with something that, frankly, there's a lot of infighting and miscommunication about in the medical
Mm-hmm.
community?
So for me, what I've been told by medical experts in POI is that it is much more dangerous for my health to have no hormones at all in my system, which would be the alternative. Because my ovaries don't work at all, so I don't make any estrogen or progesterone. So I've been told that for someone with POI, this is the safest way to protect my brain health and my bone health and my heart health. But ultimately, there's not enough research. There's not any research into POI. People still never have heard of it. So, mhm.
But just for bioidentical hormone replacement, I see that fight because we do so many podcasts with
Mhm.
doctors. And one doctor will say that's the key to successful aging, bioidentical hormones. You should get back on them, Diane. Another doctor says, no, no, no. Look at those studies. You got cancer because. And
Mhm.
this just goes back and forth and back and forth. But I will tell you one thing, and I'm going to ask you kind of a personal question,
Mhm.
but it this is reality. So I had a very strange thing happen to me. I had a female issue that took, minor surgery. You walk into the hospital, you're done an hour later, you go home. The second time it happened, and that was because I went back to work too soon and stress related. Um, the the gynecological surgeon said, "Okay, Diane, why do you still have your ovaries and your womb?" And he said, "You are walking around with useless organs that are cancer magnets, and you're really tempting fate. So why don't we just take them out when we do this next little fix up surgery?" And you know what? Honestly, Isabel, I would not be here today if he hadn't done that, because 7 years later, I was faced with stage 3 breast cancer, and it definitely would have been a major issue immediately
Mhm.
to go do a full hysterectomy. So this is a very personal question, but it is pertinent. Has anybody talked to you about that? Has anybody set up a game plan for you?
Um, in terms of people with cancer risk, I have been told that I would be very low risk for cancer because I don't have any of it in my family. Um, so
Ah, ah,
this is.
I had nobody in my family, and I was told by my surgeon that meant absolutely nothing at all. That was a myth. But
Mm.
are they, do you believe that you should keep your reproductive system because there will be a solution in the future?
It's not necessarily that there will be a solution. For me, because I have a working womb, My womb is fine. So for
Ah,
me, if I ever would like to have a child via donor egg IVF, I would be able to.
oh,
So that's an
wow.
option I like to keep open for myself
Oh
for
my
now.
God. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is a great point for sure. For me, I was well past reproductive age. It had never occurred to me to have a full hysterectomy. But when he brought it up to me, he said, look, it's only going to take an extra 15, 20 minutes, and you are so much safer from ovarian
Mhm.
cancer, womb cancer, fallopian tube cancer. And you know what? That was a hunch and a bet
Mhm.
we both took. And in fact, it did turn around and save my life. And obviously, no amount of hormone replacement was going to make me reproductive again.
Mhm.
But now let's go on to the emotional aspects of all of this,
Mm.
which is whether you are 15 or 50, when you go through this, if you're with a man, you cannot explain it to them. It's so far away from their reality. Um, And it's weird that I always chose male gynecologists who probably understood the least of it out of anybody. And how did it feel to you at 13 years old, 14, 15? I mean, you know, that is such a confusing age to begin with, and you're just coming
Mhm.
into womanhood, but you don't really know what to do with it. And here you are, and you've only been in it for about 6, 7 months, and you're already now phasing out of it. None of
Mhm.
your girlfriends are having any kind of parallel experience. What was that like for you?
It's hard to say what it was like for me because I really put just such a box on that emotion. I was obviously not capable of dealing with it when I was so young.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell anyone. I was too embarrassed or ashamed. I only told people about a year ago was the first time I started to talk about it with my friends.
Wow. 10 years
Yeah.
later.
Hmm. So I had told a few people, but yeah, it was something I really kept close to my heart because I was so embarrassed and ashamed. But it was, yeah, it's for context. Like I was told that I was infertile before I'd even kissed someone. So you have that
Oh,
whole future of, I guess, a life as a woman as you've been told it's going to be just taken away from you. So I you can't comprehend what that's going to be like when you're so young. Um so I'm processing and I'm dealing with it and I'm grieving it. That's been a process for the last few years, which has been very good and very healing, and I'm at a good place with it. But
now
yeah.
speaking of healing,
Mhm.
and it was something I actually turned to in menopause because it is so taboo. And now we'll talk about it and we'll do a podcast about it. But the people, and I know a lot of people in Manhattan, a lot of women, you do not speak about it. It is not okay. So when that happens, you cannot get the best advice. You cannot get peer
Mhm.
knowledge. You cannot get support. And I know that you were not looking for sympathy or pity. You were
Mhm.
looking for ways to cope with it, which you don't always find with an issue like this. And boy, if it is taboo for a 45 or 50-year-old to talk about it, imagine if you're 15 and you're trying to just get a grip on it.
Mhm.
What did you gravitated to yoga? What do you feel yoga has done for you in terms of alleviating some of the symptoms, giving you peace of mind, and making you feel part of a community, a female community, perhaps?
Well, physically. It's just so good for your body. It's so good for your joints. It's so good for your bones. I have osteopenia, so it's really important that I look after my bones.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and but more importantly than any of that for me, it has been it. So for me, it's been a bit of a journey with self acceptance. I think being told at such a young age that your body is broken, it's not working, really messes with your head in terms of being able to love and accept your body as it is. And that led to a lot of issues with food and exercise. And I had a pretty tumultuous journey with that all. So yoga really has given me self acceptance and self love and helped me to see my body as this beautiful vessel and a gift.
You had to do this. Basically, you had to find this and apply it all on your own, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, where at least when I went through it, and that was definitely about 33 years ago, 34, 5 years ago, yoga was just sort of this super trendy thing. Like if you wanted to be cool, you said, "Oh, I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
aerobics anymore. I'm doing yoga." But I just figured after seeing or hearing some of the great points of yoga, well, maybe this could help. And to a certain extent, it definitely did. Um, but I do ask you also, do you think that you are coping well because you married the spiritual to the medical and self-healing?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the only way I'm coping well. um, I think that
When you say that you went through um, a lot of issues and food issues for sure, the one thing I can say is, wow, I gained so much weight
Mhm.
with menopause. And, it's amazing. Even the medical community at the time, even in a city like New York City, where I always think medicine follows the money. So if you're
Mhm.
in one of the richest city on earth, you're going to have the best medical treatment. But, my feeling, and I thought, I'm not going to go through menopause till I'm about 55. That'll be okay.
Mhm.
No, it sort of crept in there starting at 40. Um, I gained a ton of weight and most of it was fat. I actually shot up to 200 pounds.
Oh, I don't work in
Nobody
hands, but
Nobody gave me any guidelines at all. No one said, here's where the fat is going to migrate. Here's where you're going to start getting joint issues. Here's what can happen with osteoporosis. So I'm going to ask, you have a totally different medical system, but you're in Nepal right now, but um, you're in Europe, Ireland, and do you ever find a doctor that marries the spiritual to the physical, to the nutritional?
Mhm.
I would just like to know because here in America, we're having a hard enough time being females.
Mm.
And I think the more that it happens where we are told that we are not capable or equal to controlling our own bodies, that men are going to control our bodies and our decisions, even strides forward in terms of menopause. I literally felt that once as a female I started going through menopause, I was no longer worth anything to society.
Mm. Mhm.
Once you were not reproductive, you were useless.
Mhm.
That was it. What what was the attitude of the medical community towards you? And did they recognize it immediately? How did they treat you? And did they marry the spiritual and the physical and the nutritional and the mental health issues? Did anybody come together and give you a whole picture of how you could cope with this successfully?
No.
Not a surprise.
No, I have recently found a really good doctor who has been just an amazing support. I had to go privately to see her because it's a really long wait. We do have a free public clinic, but it can be a really, really long wait. So I found a really good doctor recently. It's not marrying the spiritual or anything. That's my thing. I think I bring into it all. But when I was young, I don't know, was it the fault of the doctors or the medical community, or that I was too young to kind of look? But I guess maybe you shouldn't have to look. I know I was offered counseling and I rejected it because I
What's
didn't
that?
want to talk. Or I was offered therapy.
Oh, okay.
I was
Okay.
offered some sort of therapy, but at the time I was 15 and I did not want to think about it or talk about it.
Yeah.
So I just said no. At the time there was no support group. I joined a support group last year. I found it online and I joined, and it was the first time that I had ever spoken to another person with this condition. And I burst into tears. I was just
Oh,
bawling my eyes out because it was so amazing, because I had been 10 years thinking, oh, I could be the only person in Ireland who has this, which, like, that's how I really thought. I was like, yeah, that's so
no,
rare that maybe
I
it's,
would think same thing.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
know that
And I
there's
did.
loads of us actually in Ireland who have it, and I connect with them on social media now, and I have this little community of people who understand. So that's been amazing. But yeah, you have to
And
find it yourself.
I have to say that having children was never a priority for me. I was one of
Mhm.
those females that just said, I'm going to leave it to other females where it's really important to them. And
Mhm.
I knew I had other things I needed to attend to in my life. But I did find it very off putting that everybody would sit around and talk about the details of their delivery of their child and their birth. And I would be sitting there like, oh my God, I have nothing in common with these women. And then I actually have had in my lifetime several women lecture me on the fact that I am not actually a woman, because you can only be a woman if you give birth to a child. I found that so incredible. Yeah, I found that
Wow.
absolutely off-putting.
Yeah, that's
And
horrible.
yeah, yeah. So there, to me, there is so much mojo around the whole thing of fertility. And then
Mhm.
if you're in America and now you're going through this thing where you can't even have the respect to control your own fertility and your own decisions, it gets even crazier.
Mhm.
Um, and I think along the way too, there are ways to deal with menopause, and whether you get it at 15 or 50. Um, I don't know, there were maybe Ab Fab as a television series dealt with it, but it always offended me. I always thought, oh yeah, so you start dressing in really loud clothing and you drink a lot and you have a big mouth and you're always
Mhm.
doing outrageous stuff. And so the inference was, if you can't be fertile anymore, you're going to have to go through exaggerating your personality to even be seen or heard. Um, if I had to say anything to you, and I can't come from the same place you are at, I would simply say that, for instance, in the USA, the majority of America no longer wants it. The majority of American women no longer choose to have children. Now, I don't know psychologically what our country has done to make that happen, but at least I see that there are so many conscious decisions now that, no, I'm not going to do that. So, in a way, you're in the right time to have to go through what you go through, because reproduction is not a 150% common goal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And there is a rise also in infertility for whatever reasons.
Yes.
It's becoming a bigger issue. So in a way, I always like to silver line things. I always feel a little bit grateful that I have had such a long time to process and accept and plan for my future, because a lot of women get this diagnosis after trying for 8 or 9 years, and they're 40 years old nearly, and it can be so devastating at that stage as well. So yeah, I always
You
try to
know,
look for the positive.
you know what? I think no matter what, you have no choice in life if you're not going to get ahead in
Yeah.
life by just accepting whatever. I always said, when I got breast cancer, I probably would not have given up all those years when I took hormone replacement therapy, because I was on television. I couldn't have the career I had going through the kind of symptoms I was going through at the very beginning of it, of menopause. And I was grateful to have that. And then I took breast cancer, which is basically 99% a female disease. And I put it in a compartment, and I said, this is not going to overtake my entire life. This is going to be a chapter of my life, and I'm going to find something good out of it. And actually, I did. I came out the other end a very, very different person, a person much better equipped to make the most out of my third chapter of life, my old age. And I even hate to call it old age, but it just like menopause is menopause, old age is old age. So I want to thank you so much for your transparency today, and for I cannot believe that that you have a condition that is up to 4%.
And no one knows about it. Every time I tell someone I have premature ovarian insufficiency, they tell me, "Oh, I've never heard of that." But it's not that uncommon. So
Not
yeah,
if
thank
it's
you for
4%. Not if it's 4%. And I would think it can even be brought on to be more than that
of
by the
course. That's only
chemicals we
diagnosed
drink.
people.
Yeah. And also just by all the incorrect things we ingest
Mhm.
in life.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, they just found a friend of mine's daughter was diagnosed with leukemia at 9 years old, and they said, heartbreakingly enough, that they gave her too much milk to drink, and the cows all took hormones, female hormones, to make them fatter, grow bigger, and give more milk. And yeah, she went through 3 bouts of cancer because of diet. So whether it's diet, or whether it's just the luck of the draw, or whether it's not eating nutritious enough foods, whatever it is completely relevant. And it speaks to one thing, Isabelle, and I say this before we sign off: females should make a community for themselves. We don't, we seem to just branch off, get a man, have a family somehow, and that is a little encapsulation, when in fact we are over 55% of this species on Earth, and yet we act like we're all in competition, and
Mhm.
we all want to be isolated from the other one, and so incorrect. So
Mhm.
I wish you the best time ever in Nepal practicing yoga. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And thank you for being so truthful today and shining the light on something that all females are going to have to go through at
Mhm.
whatever age, and making it a little more transparent, which makes it a little easier to go through. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for giving me this platform to share my story. I really
It was
appreciate it.
great.
It was
It
great
was
to chat to
great.
you. Thank you,
I
Diane.
appreciate. Thank you so much for listening to Too Young to Be Old podcast. The episode may be over, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Diane Gilman, or visit our website, thedianegilman.com. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And until then, don't forget, age is just a number. Together, we'll prove that we are all too young to be old.